Bruins are making moves for the future. Chip Kelly, my oh my, what an extension. Let's talk about it on Locked On UCLA.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Anderson-Yoxsimer. This is the Locked On UCLA podcast. Thanks for making it your first listen each and every day. And it's free where we get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. So like, comment, and subscribe. So in the meantime, UCLA Basketball, both the men's and women's, making big strides for their tournament hopes. Although for UCLA, the men's side, we will talk about the Jalen Clark injury. In the meantime, let's get right to it. UCLA football, which I have not touched on, has extended Martin Germain. He extended Chip Kelly through the 2027 season, giving Chip Kelly the likes of some security throughout the Big Ten seasons. He was recently extended before that, just through the couple of first Big Ten seasons. But then, recently, just before the weekend, before the UCLA-Arizona game, you had Chip Kelly, who was able to get an extension and earn himself some much-needed, in what the AD said, rewards him for his winning record over the last couple of years, 17-8, the last two seasons, rewards him for building the program where it was after Jim Moore and how UCLA had to build. And then most importantly, if it doesn't work in the Big Ten, it gives UCLA some better outs in terms of buyout options while also increasing Chip Kelly's incentives to go get to a CFP, get to a CFP semifinal, get to the final. And those incentives were added by a lot. They incentivize him to be extremely dominant in the next few years. So let's talk about this contract. It's a 2-year extension through the 2027 season. He gets a raise up to $6.1 million, a $300,000 raise for this year and next year. It's raised to $6.2 million from 25 to 26 to 27. So those second, third, and fourth years in the Big Ten, Chip Kelly will get himself a big extension. They removed the retention bonuses in his contract, so there is some rewarding in that contract, but it just shows UCLA gives him that vote of confidence. I wonder how a lot of it was last year. They were pretty good, and the Bruins kept climbing. In 2021, they were impressive, but in 2022, they were nationally relevant till the end of the season almost, and then in the offseason, Chip Kelly made moves to get replacements for key guys that were leaving to the NFL, that were graduating, and proved, hey, he's building this program long-term. But if for some reason it fizzles out and all you naysayers and UCLA fans that don't like Chip Kelly, the Bruins have put themselves in position to be, hey, Chip Kelly, we're rewarding you while also benefiting ourselves by saying we can buy you out sooner. It's an $8.5 million buyout if they do it before December 2023. So if things go completely terrible this year, $8.5 million. $4.27 million. So just under $4.5 million before December 2024. So if they want to do it and the first Big Ten season goes bad or they have two terrible seasons, that's another thing. And then December 2025, there is no buyout, considering that's the year before the 2 years added on in the extension. This is one of the first extensions. So that buyout is zero. So that gives Chip Kelly a chance to build this roster, maybe be competitive in 2023, who knows? And then all of a sudden, tell the recruits, hey, I'm going to be here through the Big Ten time. I will be here. At least my contract says so. I got a vote of confidence from the athletic department, from the head man who made the move to the Big Ten. He has my back, in Chip Kelly words. And Martin got his own back in terms of, hey, if you're not doing well, you have 2 years in the Big Ten, you got 3 seasons, and you're proving that it's just not going to work, and we're just taking paychecks from the Big Ten, then we're going to go get ourselves a new man in a couple of seasons. So I think it's very beneficial to both sides. And for UCLA, they would be owed money if Chip Kelly leaves before the end of the season, $3 million. And if he leaves before the end of the 2025 season, he actually owes them $1.5 million. So it rewards the improving record. It rewards him building this program. And again, it keeps UCLA clean in terms of the opportunity to, one, try and get recruits, get guys coming in through the portal, get more high school guys building for the Big Ten day and age. And then with the incentives, if he gets there, $1 million for to win the CFP, right? An added bonus, $800K just to get to the title game. All these incentives and added bonuses for getting to 9 wins, getting to a New Year's Six bowl, getting to the title game, and everything in between. So for Chip Kelly, it secures long-term commitment and a raise. For UCLA, it covers their, it can cover their butt if Chip Kelly isn't the man in 3 years. But I think it's very promising for what UCLA football has right now. At the moment, you just have to let it play out. We all have to let it play out. I think as a fan base, we have to give Chip Kelly his due, despite all the back and forth, different things, the ideas, whether he should be fired, he should have been fired immediately. We don't need a new defensive coordinator. We need a new staff. He's made moves, the new staff moves, the portal getting Dante Moore to flip from Oregon to UCLA was probably unheard of any time before Chip Kelly started to go after him in December. So again, Chip Kelly, the Bruins, get it together. Now as we move on in Locked On UCLA, we're going to talk about the Bruins and how they're set up potentially for NCAA Tournament success in terms of the seeding and what happened in the rankings and everything. But the Jalen Clark injury casts some doubt on that as we tell you more about Built Bar. Because if you want a delicious treat that doesn't have all the fat and calories, you've got to try Built Bar. With Built, healthy is actually tasty. If you've gone through the holidays, gotten here into March Madness, you're going to sit down all weekend long, the next 2, 3, 4 weeks, you're going to sit here and just munch. You might want to stick in and grab a Built Bar because it's 100% real chocolate. It's healthy, 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, but 17 grams of protein. So you get the health, the added protein, and they've got churro, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond. All of those things are added bonuses with good flavors. All you have to do is go to Built.com, get yourself a 13-bar box, or your local Sam's Club or Walmart, get a 4-bar box, and get them today as your snack to watch March Madness. Cruising on in Locked On UCLA, it was an interesting weekend for the Bruins because they were able to sweep and dominate ASU, beat them 79-61 almost just about half a week ago. And then you got the win over Arizona, 82-73, coming in just the second game all year that UCLA has won when giving up 70 or more points. Ironically, the game UCLA wins is the higher scoring variety where they put up 80-plus points in Arizona. And the game they played against the Wildcats in Tucson was the lower scoring variety, but Arizona won that one 58-52. Isn't it kind of funny how those two things coincide? The higher scoring team that, of course, plays not so good defense, the Bruins scored points, so they won. But the day that they played a little defense and the Bruins missed shots, that's when Arizona won. So that's where it gets funky and fun. Again, Jaime Jaquez Jr. kind of putting some clamps down in terms of solidifying his case for Pac-12 Player of the Year. 24.5 points, 8.5 rebounds per game. He ended up finding a way to win Pac-12 Player of the Week in the biggest regular season end of the season for the Bruins, where, hey, he's won 3 Pac-12 Player of the Week awards. Azuolas Tubelis, he's only won 2. So in terms of dominating for a full week, Jaime Jaquez, who's even seen cheering on his sister in Vegas in the Pac-12 tournament on the women's side, he went from Saturday night, senior night, and then went out to Vegas. So that doesn't speak Pac-12 Player of the Year. Does things on both sides of the floor. He is ready. But most importantly, both him and Tiger Campbell enjoyed their senior nights as UCLA, without Jalen Clark, were able to find a way to dominate this game against Arizona, score points, and still force a total of 17 turnovers in this game against the Wildcats, which set themselves up for a quad 1 win, put themselves with all the things falling, with Kansas losing to Texas, with Alabama losing at Texas A&M, with Houston needing to win at the buzzer at Memphis just on Sunday afternoon, and Purdue struggling a couple of times. And while there were a couple of wins for UCLA that their opponents took losses, but for UCLA, the top 4 teams all were struggling. In the same week, UCLA decided to show off and show out to the committee, to the pollsters, and everything in between. Because the Bruins are now ranked number 2 in the country, their highest ranking since March 2008, when they were also ranked second in the country. Considering, hey, they went to the Final Four that year. So this is a team that everybody believes in as good as it's been. And then, most importantly, Joe Lunardi comes out and says, hey, this is a 1 seed. So UCLA gets themselves the recognition they deserve the 1 seed out west, finally shifting them over Purdue. Houston, who was the 1 seed in the west, gets shifted to the east, considering it depends where they get to play those first-round games, and then they get the Final Four in Houston. But for UCLA, they can get that Sacramento, Las Vegas, first weekend, second weekend combo. The only problem is, where does the Jalen Clark injury go into this? The UCLA Bruins have quite a few quad one wins now, stacking that Arizona win, getting that split. But then they go in the Pac-12 tournament, where they get the winner of either Colorado or Washington. Colorado is without one of their 2 leading guys, and KJ Simpson. He's out for the week. So you're either going to get a Washington team who the Bruins beat both times, or a Colorado team who the Bruins struggled twice in the quarterfinal round of the Pac-12 tournament on the men's side on this upcoming Thursday at noon. But there's without Jalen Clark. So one wonders, how much will the committee factor in what the Bruins have done already to, if they go 1 and out in the Pac-12 tournament, will that just erase everything they've done? And then they might factor in that without Jalen Clark, the Bruins might not actually be, in their minds, a 1 seed anymore. I don't think that's necessarily a good point of view to take. While their national championship hopes, their Final Four hopes are significantly dashed with Jalen Clark being hurt. There has not been, at this recording, any official update. But from what I've heard from the UCLA radio crew, Achilles probably out for a long time. I believe Jalen Clark even put something on his Instagram talking about, hey, I want a season mixtape. And if you're asking for a mixtape and the season's not over, but it's over for you, that's something. So unfortunately, Clark may have just injured himself. And if it's an Achilles, that could affect his ability to play in next year, whether it's pro, UCLA, whatever. So we wish Jalen Clark the best, but his dominance defensively throughout the non-conference, what made him a lethal weapon was his defensive ability. And while at times, especially during conference play, his offensive numbers dipped, it was the rebounding, it was the steals, it was the defense that stuck in and stuck out to the rest of the country. And he should probably very well be Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year, could be one of the finalists for National Player of the Year. So that's what the Bruins are going to miss without being, judged too harshly, I hope. The Bruins sit here with an opportunity. I'm not sure how many wins they need. You would think at least if they win 1, they can beat a Washington or Colorado. And considering Oregon and Wazoo, or dare I say it, even Cal, I'm not even thinking it, UCLA, if they win in the quarters of the Pac-12 tournament and get to the semis, then that will be an interesting matchup, because you got Oregon and Washington State who smell blood in the water, because UCLA will be coming a little shorthanded, and they'll have an opportunity to get to the finals and get themselves an auto bid for the Pac-12 tournament, stealing one of those at-large bids, potentially from their own Pac-12 conference, from an SC or Arizona State. So one wonders, does UCLA need that win, or are they not? But at the moment, they're a 1 seed. They've proven it. It just wonders how the committee will think about it and digest it. Is it resume? Is it resume and now what they look like right now? Tennessee lost one of their players out for the year. There's been other players, I believe, across the country, guys or teams are losing guys, their best guys. And UCLA, unfortunately, loses a key part at this moment, it looks like, for a long time. Not just this season, but potentially, depending on how serious this injury is, could be next year. And while we still have no MRI update, it's not looking good. But the Bruins have Jaime Jaquez Jr. and Tiger Campbell, and would want to go on a run like in 20-21, where they went to the Final Four with Johnny Juzang and Jules Bernard, Cody Riley, Jaquez, and Tiger without Chris Smith, right? So you've kind of done this a couple years ago, but you need this week to retool, refocus, and build themselves into a potential run the Pac-12 tournament? Or does Mick Cronin think backwards and wonder, do I need to rest my guys and make sure they're okay for the tournament? It's a tough time, this in-between tournament where you want to play for the 1 seed in the West, but everybody would rather have Jalen Clark and have lost that game to Arizona. That's, I think, the bottom line. And that's the unfortunate part for the UCLA Bruins right now. Meanwhile, the UCLA women's basketball team, they are fired up and they have played very well over the last week, considering it started with an overtime near choke to Arizona State in the first round of the Pac-12 tournament, with some fourth quarter demons kind of rearing their ugly head. And then all of a sudden, they go and they beat Arizona. And they do that by 14, a team where UCLA had struggled to beat earlier this year. They had them beat at Pauley, Corey Close's bunch, and then UCLA beats them. And then you play Stanford a third time in the Pac-12 tournament semifinal. as a 5 seed against the 1 seed. And what does UCLA do? They upset Stanford, being down 16 points, and end up winning that game, finding a way to beat Stanford, who's been slowly tumbling as they were tied atop with Utah. And UCLA didn't play Utah in the Pac-12 title game. They played Washington State, who the Bruins had beat by 17 earlier this year, and just more recently lost to them, recently in the last week of the regular season from Stanford to Wazoo, and Wazoo went and beat Utah. Unfortunately, UCLA's demons in the fourth quarter got exercised, but they could not complete, I guess, what some are deeming as a miniature Cinderella run. Although Washington State, who hasn't necessarily had the best program on the women's side for some time, I remember watching the broadcast, saying they had in almost 20 plus years of the conference tournament, they only had like 11 wins in the conference tournament. 11 wins. That means even if you're bad and you're playing in the first round and you're trying to win at various years, some teams luck themselves into 1 to 2 wins. So that's how Cinderella this run was for Washington State. I mean, yes, they had 19 to 20 wins now, but in terms of historical impact, they hadn't been that program. So them racing to the finish line, right? You had Charlize Ledger-Walker, and then she put up 23 points, 7 rebounds, and that was one of the biggest factors in a 65-61 UCLA loss in Michelob Ultra Arena. UCLA saw Chrisma Osborne put up 19 points, Kiki Rice 13, Emily Bissoir with 11. Those 3 players also all earned Pac-12 tournament honors. So they played well. They found ways to beat really good teams, which gives me some renewed hope. I was sitting there very skeptical after that game against Arizona. Very skeptical, wondering, saying, hey, you can't beat Arizona State in overtime at home. That's very, you can do better than that. You can certainly, in overtime in the tournament, they struggled with Arizona State a few weeks ago. And it's just like, what are we doing here? And then they go beat Arizona. And then I waited, and all of a sudden they beat Stanford. It's like, whoa, let's go, considering they failed the first 2 times, which makes the NCAA committee on the women's side have to wonder, where do we place UCLA? Because they're a top 25 team, now top 20, arguably top 15 team. A team that was within the top 10 earlier this year that's competed at Stanford, South Carolina, battled with Arizona, competed at Utah, right? That close to getting one of those signature wins. And yet UCLA's been on the precipice so often, and they got that fourth quarter down, at least in a 3-week stretch, or a 2-game stretch in 1 week, which can certainly change the impact of their seeding. Maybe they get to host a first round, whereas maybe they're falling out of hosting a first round regional in that Bubble and Pauley Pavilion. One wonders, does that put them not next to a South Carolina, who is probably a team you don't want to face despite UCLA competing with them earlier this year, closer to their place? Does UCLA get to play close to home, or do they get to go and then play close to home and then go on the road and have to play a Stanford or a South Carolina? And there's been so much turbulence atop the women's game. It's just so good to see UCLA get some wins and maybe, all of a sudden, maybe be at a dark horse to go on a deep run to an Elite Eight or a Final Four. Going down the season, the way they had played, they were stumbling towards a best-case Sweet 16. The way they played this most recent week, Osborne and Rice, spin moves on ice, You've got Bissoir, who was hitting her threes in key moments of key games this week. And then UCLA found themselves with an opportunity to win the Pac-12 tournament, which could have, dare I say it, to a 3 or 2 seed, vaulted them way up. But losing it wasn't the worst thing, as much as we wanted the Bruins to complete it. However, you just hope that the committee doesn't really screw them over in terms of placing them in a specific pod and what their path is going forward in the NCAA tournament. I do believe now this team can go to an Elite Eight or a Final Four. They need a good path to do so, yet we got to find out what that is in a week's time. So for the UCLA women, Corey Close, they figured it out for 3 out of 4 games, close in a back-and-forth loss to the Cougars. Now they breathe in and try and go on an extremely big run. More unprecedented, considering they didn't even make the tournament last year. They went to the WNIT, and now they'll be a dark horse, one could say, in the NCAA tournament this year to go make a run and give someone who's a top seed, a top 1 or 2 seed, kind of get them quaking in their boots. That's all important for the UCLA women, and that's how important for Locked On UCLA. We'll cover more football news. I believe Terry Donahue's got a new statue. We have to talk about that. We have to talk about what is UCLA losing specifically in Jalen Clark, when there's any updates here there or anything else. We'll talk UCLA women's run, Pac-12 tournament. We've got it all. Softball kicking it up. We are excited on Locked On UCLA. In the meantime, go check out Locked On College Basketball. Make that your second listen each and every day. It's free where we get your podcast. And thanks for making Locked On UCLA your first listen. So hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Thanks for your support. I'm Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer signing off. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, UCLA. UCLA fight, fight, fights. This has been Locked On UCLA. Go Bruins.